Hello and welcome to Dessert Theater for second grade. My name is Melissa O'Rear and I'm the creative dramatics teacher here at the Colorado Springs School. Dessert theater is an integral step at each child's development here at CSS, and we are so excited that we are able to maintain the integrity of this program through COVID. Through Dessert Theater process, students are encouraged to take creative risks, make choices where they think critically about the stories and characters they are bringing to life, and we learn about the actor toolbox of the face, the body, the voice, and the imagination, and how to communicate that on stage. Ultimately, they develop confidence, ownership in their roles, and teamwork with their peers. We wanted to make sure that these components were still emphasized, and in order to accommodate for the ever-changing and uncertain events of the COVID era, we decided to take a new approach this year with the Dessert Theater, which allowed us to be flexible through the process in case we had to change at a moment's notice. The second graders brought to life the story of the book Go Home River, about a boy who travels down the Alaskan River with his family. He learns about where the river begins and ends, and this ties into the second grade theme that they are studying in their classroom of the water cycle. This year, Dessert Theater took on a new approach through learning how to tell stories in different ways. As you will see in the show, the second graders first tell the story with their voice and body individually, with their masks off outside in this environment. We focused on using our facial expressions and our vocal expressions for this portion. Then we see the story unfold on stage through acting with our whole bodies, where the students are telling the stories that they narrate. All the students were able to play a family character, a piece of the environment, and the narrator. Please enjoy Go Home River.
When I was young, I lived by a wild river. The river was always going somewhere. I never got tired of it. My mom said it started in the mountains to the north and ended in the ocean to the west. But this I'd never seen.
One day, my father went down to the edge of his boat. At the edge of the river, I asked him where he was going. To the mountains in the north and the ocean in the west. As I always asked if I could go along, he always said no, not this time, but this time he said yes.
So we packed the boat, Mother, Father, and I, and set off up the river. Our dogs pulled on the tow line while Mother and Father pushed with their poles. With each bend in the river, the mountains grew closer while the river grew smaller. At the end of the day, we made a camp on a sandbar. We turned the boat upside down to join the evening sun. We watched the sun slide behind the mountains and fell asleep on the ground. Each night it was the same. On the fourth day with mountains all around us, my father lifted me onto his back and we began to climb the side of the mountain, through spruce trees and blueberry meadows, through fields of tumbled rock, all the way to the edge of the snow high on the mountain. The mountains around us were bigger than anything I had ever seen. I felt like the river below had grown very small. My father placed me down in the snow. I scrambled onto the rocks. My feet were wet, my legs were wet. I looked back and saw my footprints filling with water.
The
begins here. My mother placed dried white fish and seal oil on a flat rock for us. Eating made me thirsty. Listen, my father said. I could hear gentle water under the rocks, but I could not see it. Then I found an opening where a small stream trickled down the mountains. My father showed me how to cup my hands and fingers tightly together to drink. The river begins here. A cool wind began to blow. Clouds darkened the sun, and suddenly I was cold. Raindrops splashed on the rocks. Clouds rumbled. Come, my father said, and he walked swiftly down an old caribou trail. Lightning flashed. A great curtain of rain moved across the face of the mountain, closer, and then we were in it. Big raindrops trickled down my father's hair and onto my cheek. The river begins here. When we reached the river, it was full of melted snow and swollen with rain. I had found a hard green rock in the bed, and I showed it to my mother. Her eyebrows rose. Jade, she said, we can use this. She wrapped it in a caribou skin and tucked it into the boat. We all climbed into the boat, Mother, Father, and I. We sped down the rushing river for 5 more days. We met other rivers, and our river grew wider, stronger, and deeper. It was hard to imagine our river ever been small.
Then one day the river began to take itself apart. It split into smaller rivers, first one to the left, then another, then again. I asked my father, why were the rivers getting smaller? He held out his hand, spreading his fingers wide. The river ends with many fingers. This is but one.
The willows drew back from the shore, and then the shore disappeared into the water. All I could see ahead was water and sky, sky and water. The river had become impossibly, fearfully large. My father could see the question in my eyes. We reached the ocean, he said. The river ends here. We paddled on until we came to a wide beach lined with boats, tents with a lot of people. I never imagined this many people would be at the end of the river. I walked through the camp with my father. There were big sealskins filled with oil, carved with harpoon, heads of ivory, and beautiful sealskins with short hair, black and white. There were bags of flour, tins of coffee, bolts of cloth, and beads of every color. It was a wondrous fair. My father unrolled his clothes and set out my mother's baskets. He showed many people the trade I had found and traded it for an equally heavy piece of ivory. The trading lasted for days. Then one after another, people took down the tents, loaded the boats, and paddled away along the coast. One morning or two, a thick fog floated from the ocean and covered the trading beach. I could hear waves break on the shore, but I could not see them break on the shore. I could hear gulls argue, but I could not find them in the sky. I could hear people talking, but I could not understand their words. My father came out of our tent. He looked at the fog. The river is going home, he said. The river does not stay in the ocean forever. On cold mornings, it rises up into the clouds and goes home to the mountains. When the fog lifts, we will go home too. And soon, the fog did lift, and we pushed off from the trading beach, and we sailed towards the river. The sun rose higher in the sky, and the air grew warmer. Far away, the mountains seemed small, but I knew they were not. I can see the snow that one day would melt into the river. I watched clouds pile into the mountains and lose the rain into the river, too. But we entered the gentle river, and I was glad. I lay down in the boat and felt the river flow beneath me. I could feel each stroke of the paddles pull the boat home. I watched the clouds move across the sky. How easy it was for the river to float home in the clouds. As I drifted towards sleep, I imagined that I too was floating home on the clouds. Go home, river, go. I lived by a wild river. The river was always going somewhere. I never got tired of it. My mother said it started in the mountains to the north and ended in the ocean to the west. But this I never seen.
One day, my father went down to his boat at the edge of the river. I asked him where he was going. To the mountains in the north and the ocean in the west, he said, as I always asked if I could go along. Before, he had always said, no, not this time, but this time he said yes.
So we packed the boat. Mother, father, and I, and set off up the river. Our dogs pulled on the tow line, while mother and father pushed with their poles. With each bend in the river, the mountains grew closer while the river grew smaller. At the end of the day, we made a camp on a sand boat. We turned the boat upside down to join the evening sun. We cooked over a small fire and listened to the geese calling from the lakes. We watched the sun slide behind the mountains and fell asleep on the ground. Each night it was the same. On the fourth day, with mountains all around us, we left the river. My father lifted me onto his back and we began to climb the side of a mountain, through spruce trees, across blueberry meadows, up steep fields of tumbled rock, all the way to the edge of the snow high on the mountain. The mountains around us were bigger than anything I had ever seen. I felt like the river below had grown very small. My father placed me down in the snow. I scrambled onto the rocks. When my feet were wet, my legs were wet, my footprints were filling with water.
The river begins here.
My mother placed a dried white fish and seal oil on a flat rock for us. Eating made me thirsty. Listen, my father said. I could hear gentle water under the rocks, but I could not see it. Then I found an opening where a small stream trickled down the mountain. My father showed me how to cut my hands and fingers tightly together to drink.
The river begins here.
A cool wind began to blow. Clouds darkened the sun, and suddenly I was cold. Raindrops splashed on the rocks. Clouds rumbled. Come, my father said, and he walked swiftly down an old caribou trail. Lightning flashed. A gray curtain of rain moved across the face of the mountain. Closer, and then we were in it. Big drops of rain trickled off my father's hair and onto my cheek.
The river begins here.
When we reached the river, it was full of melted snow and swollen with rain. I found a hard green rock in the riverbed, and I showed it to my mother. Her eyebrows rose. Jade, she said, we can use this. She wrapped it in a caribou skin and tucked it into the boat. We all climbed into the boat. Father, mother, and I sped down the rushing river. For 5 more days we traveled. Our river met other rivers. Each time our river grew wider and stronger and deeper. It was hard to imagine our river had had ever been small.
Then one day the river began to take itself apart. It split into smaller rivers. I asked my father, why were the rivers getting smaller? He held out his hand, spreading his fingers wide. The river ends with many fingers. This is but one.
The willows drew back from the shore, and then the shore disappeared into the water. All I could see ahead was water and sky and water. The river had become impossibly, fearfully large. My father could see the question in my eyes. We have reached the ocean, he said.
The river ends here.
We paddled on until we came to a wide beach landing, boats, tents, and with a lot of people. I never imagined this many people would be at the end of the river. I walked through the camp with my father. There were big sealskins filled with oil, carved with harpoon, heads of ivory, and beautiful sealskins with short hair, black and white. There were bags of flour, tins of coffee, bolts of cloth, and beads of every color. It was a wondrous fair. My father unrolled his furs and set out my mother's baskets. He showed many people the jade I had found and traded it for an equally heavy piece of ivory. The trading lasted for days. Then one after another, people took down the tents, loaded the boats, and paddled away along the coast. On the morning we were to leave, a thick fog floated from the ocean and covered the trading beach. I could hear waves, but I could not see them break on the shore. I could hear gulls argue, but I could not find them in the sky. I could hear people talk, but I could not understand their words. My father came out of our tent. He looked at the fog.
The river is going home, he said. The river does not stay in the ocean forever. On cold mornings, it rises up into the clouds and goes home to the mountains. When the fog lifts, we will go home too. And soon the fog did lift, and we pushed off from the trading beach, and we sailed toward the river. The sun rose higher in the sky, and the air grew warmer.
Far away, the mountains seemed small, but I knew they were not. I could see the snow that one day would melt into the river, and I watched the clouds pile into the mountains and lost their rain into the river, too. We entered the gentle river. I was glad. I lay down in the boat and felt the river flow beneath me. I could feel each stroke of the paddles pull the boat home. I watched the clouds move across the sky. How easy it was for the river to float home. As I drifted towards sleep, I imagined that I too was floating home on the clouds.
Hi, and welcome to 4th grade Dessert Theater. The 4th graders brought 6 different folk tales to life from all over the country. This group also worked on different aspects of storytelling. Because we had to wear masks, they learned how to storytell with their bodies only while the story is being narrated. For this section, we worked on being very slow, specific, and exaggerated with our bodies. Then they also learned how to tell the story in small groups. At these moments in the show, the fourth graders were able to remove their masks due to being 6 feet apart, only 3 people in the scene being so short, and airflow. The fourth graders play 3 different roles and also move all the set pieces. Through this process, they have strengthened their collaboration, ability to adapt and adjust to a variety of stories, and ability to focus, which are skills we emphasize at the 4th grade level. Please enjoy Some Folks Say, Tales and Folklore from Across America.
A young man named Arthur came to the Arizona Territory looking for silver. He rode the train from Boston all the way to Tombstone.
When Arthur stepped off the train, the streets were crowded. Pretty girls waved at him from the saloon. Outlaws rode by, their pistols still smoking.
Arthur saw a grizzled old prospector washing his face in a horse trough. He had a dusty sack at his feet. "Morning, friend," said Arthur. "I've come for silver."
The prospector grunted. "You and every other tenderfoot bunch of city boys with no idea how to survive in the desert. There's a reason they call this town Tombstone, you know?"
But Arthur wasn't scared. "You just tell me which way to ride, and I'll come back with a sack full of riches," he said.
The prospector dunked Arthur's head in the trough. "Drink up, boy," he said. "That'll be the last clean water you taste all week."
Once Arthur had dried his face, the prospector told him to ride north and east toward the Dos Cabezas Mountains.
"Whatever you do, stay on the path," the old man warned. "Otherwise, the desert will eat you up."
Arthur bought a mule, a pickaxe, and supplies for his journey. Then he rode alone out of Tombstone.
The blistering sun beat down. About 10 miles down the trail, a gust of wind blew away Arthur's new hat. He leapt off the mule to chase it.
Arthur barreled through the scrub, his boots sinking in the deep desert sand. At last, he caught his hat. But when Arthur turned around, there was no sign of his mule or the trail.
He ran this way and that, looking for a familiar sight. After an hour, Arthur still hadn't found the trail. "I've got to think," he said aloud. "The afternoon sun will throw my shadow east, so if I follow my shadow, I'll reach those cabezas eventually."
It was a clever thought, except nobody told Arthur that the mountains were 20 miles away. Arthur staggered on in the heat.
The desert wobbled before his eyes as he grew weaker. For a moment, Arthur thought he saw one of the saloon girls again, waving and giggling at him. "Oh, darling, you're a sight for sore eyes," he hollered. He rushed over and gave her a big hug.
Only it wasn't a saloon girl. It was a saguaro cactus. He was so hot and thirsty, he'd been tricked by mirage. He plucked the cactus needles from his cheek and kept walking.
Arthur's throat felt as dry as dust. "I'm gonna die of a heat stroke if I don't find water soon," he said. Suddenly, he heard a train whistle in the distance.
Arthur couldn't believe it. He climbed a boulder and looked around. Try as he might, he couldn't spot any railroad tracks in the desert sand.
"Must be hearing things," Arthur said, dropping back to the ground. He closed his eyes, weary with thirst.
Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, Arthur could hear the train again. Louder this time, he covered his ears, determined not to be tricked. The air sizzled as Arthur felt the hiss of a steam engine.
He opened his eyes and saw a black speck in the distance. The shadow raced closer, growing bigger by the second. He heard the sharp whistle once, twice. A jet black train was coming right for him!
The train rolled across the sand, its bright headlamp nearly blinding him. Arthur fell to his knees. He wanted to run, but the journey had left him too exhausted. Arthur clenched his teeth, bracing for impact. 100 feet away, 50 feet away, 20. Suddenly, the train screeched to a halt. It stopped inches away from Arthur's head.
All aboard! A voice cried. A bright-eyed conductor jumped off the train and ran to Arthur's side. Got your ticket, son? He asked.
I must have lost it," Arthur lied.
Well then, you have to pay at the end of the line. In the meantime, let's get you a seat. He grabbed Arthur by the shoulders while a porter grabbed Arthur's feet.
They gently carried him into a passenger car. It felt like a dream. "Would y'all care for some coffee, sir?" the porter asked. Arthur shook his head. Water, he gasped before he collapsed into a deep sleep.
The next thing he knew, Arthur tasted cool water. He opened his eyes, and the shadow train had vanished. A sheriff stood over him, holding a glass of water. He drank slowly until he could finally speak.
Where am I?" Arthur asked.
Wilcox, Arizona, the sheriff replied. "I found you lying in the street."
"How far is that from Tombstone?" Arthur asked.
The sheriff rubbed her chin. "About 50 miles, she said, if you're full enough to ride through the desert."
Arthur reached for his hat, but it wasn't there. He heard a train whistle far off in the distance. "I must have left my hat on the train," he mumbled.
The sheriff looked puzzled. "What train, son? The nearest crossing is a full day's ride from here."
Sitting up, Arthur saw white puffs of smoke in the distance. "The shadow train," Arthur pointed. "Look, there it goes."
The sheriff looked, then shook her head. "You'd better get some rest," she said. You're hallucinating."
A few days later, the grizzled old prospector rode into town on Arthur's mule.
"Hey, that's mine!" Arthur shouted.
The prospector smiled. "Do tell, I bought off a railroad man a few days back. Said some poor fellow didn't have any train fare, so he took the mule instead. And with that, the old man rode off for the mountains."
Some folks say when the Arizona sun burns bright, you can still hear the shadow train racing across the desert where no tracks lead.
Paul Bunyan was the biggest lumberjack you ever see. Some say 7 feet tall, others claim as tall as a house.
Paul felled timber from coast to coast alongside Baby's big blue ox. Now, a big man like Paul had a big appetite. When Paul sat down for breakfast, Sourdough Sam cooked 500 flapjacks just for him.
The other lumberjacks ran from stove to table, bringing him plate after plate. After a few hours, Paul would pat his belly and say, "I'm full." Meanwhile, the other lumberjacks were exhausted and hungry as bears. When Sourdough Sam brought out the next plate of flapjacks, they fought over them.
I'll take those, Elmer the elder said, yanking the plate out of Sam's hands.
"No, they're mine," little Elmer argued, taking the plate for herself.
They got a pushing and a wrestling. Before long, little Elmer bumped the table, knocking all the flapjacks into the dirt.
Nobody but Paul got any breakfast that day, except for Babe the ox, who didn't mind a little dirt. "Shame on you, boys," Paul said. "If you can't share, we'll all suffer."
Sorry, Paul, Elmer the elder said, but we're so hungry.
"Can't you cook any faster?" little Elmer asked Sam.
Sourdough Sam shook his head. "I used every inch of that griddle, so unless you boys want to eat raw batter, you'll have to wait."
The lumberjacks sat and tried to solve their problem, but it's hard to think on an empty stomach. Folks could hear their bellies growling from a mile away.
At last, Paul smiled. "I got a humding of an idea. We'll make a flapjack so big it would feed the whole logging camp for a year."
Paul went to see Ole, his favorite blacksmith. Ole forged the giant axe for Paul and his men.
"Can you make a pancake griddle?" Paul asked.
"Yeah, sure, you betcha," Ole replied. No matter what Paul asked for, Ole always said yes.
Paul whistled the Babe. The big blue ox dug its horns into a mountain and opened up an iron mine. Ole and Sam spent a week digging up iron.
The lumberjacks didn't know how to cook without Sam, so they got skinnier and skinnier. "What I wouldn't give for a dusty flapjack right now," little Elmer moaned.
"I'm so hungry I could eat my saw," Elmer the elder said.
Ole forged the iron griddle. It was so big that if you stood on one side, you couldn't see the other side. And also, she made a giant egg beater that could ride like a bicycle.
Meanwhile, Sourdough Sam gathered the ingredients. He filled in an empty lake with fresh milk. When geese flew south from Canada, Sam made scary faces at them. The geese were so startled they dropped eggs like a hailstorm into the creamy lake.
"Can we eat yet?" little Elmer asked, licking her lips.
"No," Paul answered. "It's not cooked."
"That's okay," Elmer the elder said. "I've got a straw."
Now there's no flapjack than a blueberry flapjack. So Paul sent the lumberjacks to pick berries. Elmer and little Elmer looked high and low, but they couldn't find any blueberries.
Babe felt sorry for them, so the big ox ran all the way to Maine, dug up blueberry bushes, skewered them on her horns, and brought them back to camp. Blueberry
blueberries have grown in Michigan ever since.
As for Paul, he took care of the firewood. With his mighty axe, Paul felled a whole forest in one night. He finished right before sunrise with a mighty fierce hunger.
The next morning, Sourdough Sam started to make the flapjack. Elmer and Elmer stuffed hunks of bacon to their boots and scathed crust and griddle until slick and greasy.
Sourdough Sam got ready for the battle. Wait, and said, "How am I supposed to flip such a giant flapjack?" "No sweat," little Elmer said. "Paul can turn it with his axe."
But Paul Biden was so tired from chopping firewood, he couldn't lift his axe. For the first time, the lumberjacks had to solve the problems without him. They thought and thought. Finally, Elmer the Elder asked Ole, "Do you have any blasting powder?"
Yeah, sure, you betcha, Ole replied. Working as a team, Elmer and Little Elmer and Ole and Sam sprinkled blasting powder onto the griddle.
Sourdough Sam ladled out the batter. Then the lumberjacks took turn tossing blueberries on top. Soon the smell of flapjack covered over the camp like a cloud. Paul smiled. "Good work, boys. You shared the work and you'll share the reward." The griddle rumbled and growled like an earthquake. "The powder's gonna blow," Sam said. "Everybody duck!"
Yeah, sure, you betcha, Ole replied.
Now, there was a fiery pop. Flapjack launched into there, casting a shower over the whole country. As it began to fall, it flipped and landed cooked side up. Once the flapjack was golden brown, Paul hitched it to Babe. And the big ox pulled breakfast to the table.
Everyone ate together. No more waiting or hungry bellies. And the only thing that Elmer and Little Elmer fought over was the syrup bottle.
After breakfast, Paul Biden stood. "This meal brings back my favorite blessings in life," the big man said. "A hard day's work, a full stomach, and good friends."
Only one problem, Sourdough Sam added. "Who's gonna wash the dishes?"
The lumberjacks looked man to man. Then they all stared at Ole.
The blacksmith smiled. Yeah, no, not happening.
boy. You weren't taking fun on hot summer days. You wouldn't wrestle or play games. You never, ever, ever ate meat.
Nunley stood on the shore watching the other children swim.
He must be afraid of sharks, E.T. What a baby to said. We splashed by and were laughing as we ran away.
Liani, the chief's daughter, felt sorry for Nanaue. She found him hunting for seashells. "I like your cape," Liani said.
Thank you, Nanaue smiled with all his teeth. My father made it for me.
Liani had never seen Nanaue's father. The boy stayed close to his mother at all village feasts. "Where's your father now?" Liani asked.
Nanaue looked down. He's not here. He travels the ocean.
Liani nodded. Her brother had boarded a ship 2 years ago and never returned to Hawaii. Sometimes sailors would bring her letters from him. The chief's daughter and the boy in the cape stared out to sea, listening to the waves crash against the rocks. "Nanaue," his mother Kaylee called. "Time to go home, my prince." The boy waved goodbye as he ran to his mother. Kaylee pulled Nanaue's cape tight around his shoulders and gave him a coconut to drink.
The next day, Nanue ran up to Liani with a big, toothy grin and handed her a necklace made of sea glass. "It's beautiful," Liani said.
Nanue beamed with pride. "I swam down to a sunken ship and searched for broken bottles," he told her.
Liani giggled. No one could dive that deep. Besides, everyone knew Nanue was afraid of the water. "What else did you see, my mighty explorer?" she asked.
"I saw turtles and rays and fish of every color. When I told them about you, they helped me collect the sea glass."
"Oh, so you can detect a fish?" Liani said with a smile.
Nanue looked puzzled. Doesn't everyone?"
The two friends played on the reef, jumping from rock to rock.
Suddenly, I was knocked Liani into the she fell into the ocean. Liani was a strong swimmer, but the fall had knocked the breath from her lungs. Far above, she heard a thunderous splash.
Liani froze. She saw a reef shark swimming right before her, but the shark did not bite. It gently pushed her to the surface.
Liani gasped for air. When she looked around, the shark had disappeared.
Nanue pulled her up onto a rock. "Are you okay?" he asked.
"I was rescued by a shark," Liani said. "It must have been Kamohali."
All the villagers knew Kamohali, the shark king. He could take the form of any fish.
"I'm glad you're safe," Nanue said. "I thought the ocean would swallow you up."
As they spoke, Liani realized that Nanue had wet hair. "Did you jump in the water?" Liani asked.
Nanue blushed. "I wasn't sure I could help, but I had to try," he said. "You're my best friend."
From then on, Liani spent most of her time with Nanue. The other boys grew jealous. Huey and Tui got so mad, they snuck up behind Nanue and stole his cape.
"Give that back," Nanue shouted. The boys raced through the village. Liani followed them.
At last, Nanue caught Huey. He wrapped himself in the cape, and not before Liani saw the giant shark mouth on his back.
That night, Liani crept into Nanue's hut and found his mother, Kayali, sitting by a small pool. "I saw the mark on Nanue's back," Liani said.
Kaylee sighed. She ran her fingers through the water.
"He got that mark from his father, Kamohali, the Shark King."
Kaylee told her the whole story years ago. Kamohali had come to the island disguised as a man. The two fell in love and had a baby.
Kamohali had to return to the ocean, but before he left, he warned me to never, ever give Nanue meat.
Every shark peeked out of the pond. Liani recognized a shark that had rescued her.
"Please, you can't tell anyone," Kayali begged. Liani promised to keep it a secret.
The next day, the village had a feast. Nanue sat with his mother and Liani. Huey approached, along with Tua. "I'm sorry I stole your cape," he said. "Come eat with the men."
"No, thank you," Nanue said. "I will sit right here."
"Please," Tua said. "Give us a chance to be your friends." At last, Nanu gave in, but he clutched his cape tightly.
The villagers passed bowls of poi and pineapple and fish grilled over coals.
Tua handed Nanue a long skewer of meat. "Here, taste this."
Nanue sniffed it. It smelled delicious. He looked over at his mother, but she was busy talking to the woman. So he took a bite, and then he took another.
Nanue went into a feeding frenzy. More and shouted, "More!"
Huey laughed. "You eat like a shark."
Nanue looked at Huey with a hungry, toothy smile. "I have an idea," he said. "Why don't we go swimming?"
The two boys slipped away from the feast. Huey dove into the ocean.
"Take care," Nanue said, licking his lips, "or we may disappear. That's a tail."
Then he jumped in after Huey. Huey waited for Nanue to surface, but the boy was gone.
Instead, he saw a shark swim right for him.
Liani dove into the water and swam between them. "Don't hurt him," she told the shark. "I know he is a bully, but you are a prince. You must control yourself."
The reef shark stared at him with his cold, black eyes and swam away. Now I never set foot on land again, for fear of losing control. Some folks say he went to find his father. The shark, others say he went to let explore from the tricks on bullies.
But one thing's for sure. Whenever Liani walked by the beach, she always found a piece of sea glass.
Woodrow Wilson's wife Ellen died at the White House in 1914. She was actually the third wife of the president to die in that house. But the staff never mentioned that. It was bad luck. Woodrow missed Ellen very much. He took long, lonely walks to Washington, D.C. Of course, a president doesn't stay lonely for long. Woodrow fell in love with Edith, a charming widow. When they got married, the president bananas. Rumors swirled that Woodrow cheated on his first wife and murdered Ellen.
Edith didn't care. Let them gossip, she said. I serve my husband, not the country.
Edith asked her new secretary, Miss Benham, to prepare the White House for the first big dinner party.
Everything must be perfect, Edith said. The flowers, the music, even the table linens.
Miss Benham worked on the tables in the East Room, then left to discuss the menu. When she returned, the tables had moved.
Miss Benham didn't see anyone else around, but she did smell a faint whiff of lavender soap. Did anyone enter the East Room? She asked the doorman.
No one missed, some replied, except the ghost.
Miss Benham could hardly believe her ears.
Didn't you know, Tom grinned, the White House is full of ghosts.
Miss Benham decided to take a coffee break for the rest of the day. At dinner, Edith asked, "Is everything ready for my party?"
Not yet, ma'am, Miss Benham said. A ghost is causing trouble.
Woodrow turned pale. A ghost? Do you think it was Ellen?
I don't know, sir, Miss Benham said. I didn't see it.
The First Lady huffed. Such nonsense. It was probably the wind.
Miss Benham never seen the wind move a table. Then again, she never seen a ghost before.
At midnight, she tiptoed back to the East Room. Suddenly, her face felt cold and wet. The lavender scent had returned.
"Step away from my petticoats," a voice cried. "You'll wrinkle them." Miss Benham turned to see a pale woman holding an armful of wet laundry. "Oh, you scare me," Miss Benham said. "Are you Miss Wilson's maid?" The woman huffed. "I'm not a maid. I'm the First Lady of the United States."
Miss Benham
froze with fear.
Ellen, she whispered.
No, the ghost replied. My name is Abigail Adams. Then she disappeared.
Miss Benham didn't sleep a wink that night. As soon as Tom got to work, she cornered him. Tell me everything you know about ghosts, yes?
Tom laughed. That would take ages, he said. He handed her an old dusty book, and she started reading at the rose garden.
Abigail Adams had moved from the White House while it was still under construction. The swampy DC air made her laundry smell funny, so she hung her wet clothes in the east room to dry.
All the ghost stories sounded silly in the sunlight. She should begin to pick roses for the centerpiece. Ed.
No, my babies, a voice cried. A pale woman in gardening gloves and a fancy dress knocked Miss Benham to the ground. How dare you spoil my roses?
Miss Benham felt the same chill as the first time she saw Abigail's ghost. I'm sorry, ma'am, Miss Benham said. I need those flowers for the First Lady.
I am the First Lady, the ghost replied. Dolly Madison. I was the last one here when the British set the house on fire. Miss Benham scrambled to her feet and ran inside.
Is something wrong, my dear? The president asked.
Ghosts, ghosts everywhere, she shrieked. Miss Benham bolted the door and wedged a chair against the handle.
Is something wrong, my dear? The president said.
Ghosts, ghosts everywhere, she shrieked.
Woodrow looked shocked but tried to think clearly. Locking them out won't help. Ghosts will pass the laws, he said. If anything, you've locked us in.
What do I do, Miss Benham asked.
Well, everyone else does when they first go to Washington, D.C. Try to make friends.
Miss Benham took the president's advice. She watered Dolly's rose bushes. She stoked the fire in the east room so Abigail could dry her laundry. She even polished the First Lady's portraits.
Finally, the day of the big party arrived. What a disaster, Edith said. The servants are sick and we have so much to do.
Don't worry, ma'am, Miss Benham said. I know of some ladies who can help.
The ghosts went to work. Abigail draped freshly washed linens on the tables. Dolly decorated with her finest roses. Edith was frightened, but she rolled up her sleeves and worked beside her fellow first ladies.
Right before the guests arrived, Tom pulled out his violin and filled the room with music.
Thank you, Thomas, Abigail said.
Least I could do, Abigail, he replied.
Miss Benham looked shocked. You know old Tom, she asked Abigail.
Of course, Abigail said. He was my husband's vice president.
Thomas Jefferson winked at Miss Benham and kept on playing. Edith didn't throw many parties after that. The country was at war and she wanted to set an example of simple living. At least that's what she told the press. But late at night, folks swore they saw lights in the east room, the sound of a violin, and the unmistakable scent of lavender. One fine spring day, Bird Fox planted a peanut patch. He worked hard, digging and tilling in the hot sun. Meanwhile, Brer Rabbit walked in shade. He licked his lips out to follow those tasty, toasty peanuts. Well, in that part of Georgia, peanuts grow like weeds. Soon Brer Fox had a fine crop. I'll need a bucket for all these goobers, Brer Fox said.
He ran to borrow a bucket from Brer Bear's house. Soon as he left, Brer Rabbit slipped under the fence and stole the ripest peanuts.
Tee tonga lee, I eat a pea, I pick a pea, Brer Rabbit sang. Then he ran home to his bunny children, Betty, Dib, and Nan.
Where did you get all these peanuts, Papa? Little Betty asked.
From my friend Brer Fox, Brer Rabbit said.
He must be a great friend to share his crop, Dib said.
Oh yes, Brer Rabbit said. Every time I see Brer Fox, I get a big smile.
Nan didn't say a word, seeing as her mouth was full.
About that time, Brer Fox came running with a bucket when he saw someone had stole peanuts off the vines. He got mighty mad. I bet Brer Rabbit done this, Brer Fox said, and walked along the garden's edge to the crackling fence. Right there, Brer Fox set a trap. The next morning, Brer Rabbit came slipping through the crack. The rope slipped around his front paws and he shot into the air, where he hung helplessly from a tall tree.
I knew I'd get ya, Brer Fox cheered.
Brer Rabbit had to think fast. Good to see you, Brer Fox, Brer Rabbit said. I just came to pay for the peanuts.
Oh, you'll pay, Brer Fox said, flashing his teeth. I'm gonna eat your little bunny children.
When Brer Fox arrived at Brer Rabbit's house, the bunnies waved to him. Hello, Uncle Fox, Betty said. Did you bring us more peanuts?
The little bunnies were so fat, they made Brer Fox's mouth water. He knew he couldn't eat them without some excuse, though. After all, they were neighbors.
Brer Fox settled into a rocking chair. Bunny child, do me a favor, he said.
Of course, Uncle Fox, Nan said.
Break this piece of sugar cane, Brer Fox said, handing them a thick reed. If you're naughty and disobey, I'll gobble you up.
The little bunnies took the sugar cane outside. Hard as they tried, their little arms couldn't let alone bend, let alone break it.
Hurry up, bunny child, Brer Fox shouted. I'm waiting.
Meanwhile, Brer Rabbit watched from the tree. He wanted to help, but he couldn't wiggle out of the trap. So whistling like a mockingbird, he sang, take your toothies, gnaw it, saw it. If you eat it, you'll defeat it.
Great idea, Dib said. The bunnies nibbled and gnawed at the sugar cane until it snapped in half.
They brought the broken cane to Brer Fox, who snarled in frustration. But the old fox was determined to get his revenge. Do me a favor, bunny child, Brer Fox said.
Whatever you wish, Uncle Fox, Betty said.
Take this cup and fetch me water from the creek, Brer Fox said, hand him a sieve. If you're naughty, I'll eat your ears.
The bunnies took the sieve to the creek. Every time they filled it, water leaked out the holes. Dib sat and cried, "This is hopeless."
Brer Rabbit watched the bunnies spill and splash in the water, and then they heard him sing. You can make the water safe, plug the holes with river clay. What a strange bird song, Betty said. The bunnies dug in the creek bed until their paws were all muddy. Then they plugged the holes. When Brer Fox saw the full sieve of water, he was so mad he nearly choked. Oh, thank you, bunny child, Brer Fox snarled. Do me one last favor.
Our pleasure, Uncle Fox, Nan said.
This one's easy as pie, Brer Fox said. Put a log on the fire.
The bunnies ran to the woodpile. To their dismay, they saw that Brer Fox had burnt up all the kindling.
The only log left is bigger than me, Dib cried. The poor bunny children circled the log and tried to lift it, but the wood didn't budge.
Brr, Brer Fox shouted. Where is that firewood, you naughty bunnies?
Betty's ears drooped to the ground. Uncle Fox will eat us for sure.
Then they heard Brer Rabbit sing, Fit in your hands, tug and toll it, get behind the log and roll it.
The bunnies put their back to the log and shoved as hard as they could. Slowly, the log began to roll.
Meanwhile, Brer Rabbit tried once again to get free, but he just couldn't untie the knot. Just then, Brer Bear came lumbering down the road. He was big, but not much for brains. Howdy, Brer Bear, Brer Rabbit called.
Brer Bear looked up. When he saw Brer Rabbit swinging from the tree, he laughed. "What are you doing up there?" Brer Bear asked.
Why, I'm working, Brer Rabbit lied. Brer Fox pays me $1 per minute to keep the crows out of his peanut patch.
You've got to remember, this is an old tale. $1 was worth a fortune back then.
Say, Brer Rabbit said, you take this job. I've got bunny children at home that I need to take care of.
Brer Bear was so excited he bent the tree branch to the ground, letting Brer Rabbit loose. Before long, Brer Bear was swinging in the tree. It looked mighty silly.
Brer Rabbit got home just as the bunnies finished rolling the log onto the fire. Howdy, Brer Fox, Brer Rabbit said.
Thanks for watching my bunny children. I reckon they paid for peanuts over doing all those chores.
Brer Fox snarled and headed home. As he passed the peanut patch, he heard Brer Bear's booming voice.
"Get back here, Brer Fox! You owe me $15.
Long ago, before man's time, the weather stayed warm all year long. For you see, the Creator had not yet thought of winter. Mouse and Coyote would play in the grass. Owl and Turtle stayed up late to learn service with the happiest creature of them all was Rainbow Feather. Back then, Crow had feathers of every color, yellow and red and the brightest green. When she flew, it looked like a rainbow!
And her voice? Rainbow Crow sang sweeter than a nightingale. The other animals would gather at her tree to hear Crow's song.
Then one day the earth turned white, cold sparkling flakes fell from the sky. Brr, what is this? Mouse asked. My whiskers are shivering.
It looks like rice, Coyote said. I will gobble it up, then the warmth will return.
Coyote ran around with his mouth open, catching snowflakes on his tongue. He ate and ate until his belly hurt, but Coyote could not stop the snow.
Soon the snow grew so deep that Mouse disappeared. His friends could only see the tip of his tail peeking out.
Hide underground, Owl told Mouse. You'll be safe and warm there. So Mouse dug a hole to escape the snow and did not return all winter.
The other animals gathered to discuss their problem. The Creator had made a bad thing, Turtle said.
We must send a messenger up to the 12th heaven, Owl said, and ask the Creator to unmake the snow.
Who will take such a long journey? Coyote asked.
Owl is the wisest, Turtle said. He should go.
Owl shook his head. I can only fly at night. How could I reach the sun?
I am too slow, Turtle said. Perhaps we should send Coyote?
Coyote howled with delight.
Ow! 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 No, Owl said. Coyote is a trickster. He might run away and never come back.
The snow got deeper and deeper. Turtle had to climb onto Coyote's head so he wouldn't disappear.
Just as the animals lost hope, Rainbow Crow flew down from her tree and sang, I will go.
Rainbow Crow flew high into the sky, above the snow, beyond the clouds, past the moon and the stars. She flew for 3 days until icicles hung from her tail.
At last, Crow reached the 12th heaven, but the Creator did not notice.
He was too busy playing with snow. But luckily, Rainbow Crow knew just what to do. She sang the most beautiful song.
The Creator looked up and smiled.
Thank you for this gift of song, he said. What can I give you in return?
Crow asked the Creator to unmake the snow.
The Creator sighed. No, little bird, I cannot take back the snow. It has its own spirit now.
Then Crow asked the Creator to take back the cold.
The Creator sighed. I cannot take back the cold, he said. However, I will give you something new to keep you warm.
The Creator picked up a stick and poked it into the sun. Then he placed the fiery stick in Crow's beak.
Hurry, the Creator said. Fly back to Earth before the flame goes out.
Off she flew, past the stars and moon. When Rainbow Crow was flying through the clouds, her beautiful feathers caught fire.
Crow could not stop. She kept flying before her long feathers had all turned pitch black, and her flesh smelled of soot.
The fire burned brighter as the stick grew shorter. Soon, smoke and ash blew into Crow's mouth. She sputtered and choked. Crow could hear her voice turning hoarse. Caw, caw, she croaked, yet she kept going.
When Crow reached the forest, her friends were nowhere to be seen. Only the tops of the trees were visible.
Crow swooped down, flying just above the snow. Around and around she flew until the fire had melted away enough snow for Owl's head to peek out.
Who are you? Owl asked. He did not recognize Crow with black feathers.
Crow kept melting the snow until she found Coyote and Turtle. Ew, what state? Coyote asked. He covered his nose with his paw.
At last, Crow melted away the last snow. Mouse popped out of his hole. Thank you so much, Mouse squeaked. But Crow tried to reply, but her voice sounded ugly.
The stick of fire Crow had brought to earth became the grandfather of all fires. The other animals danced for joy. Meanwhile, Crow flew off by herself. She cried and cried for days on end. I am no longer beautiful, Crow sobbed. My rainbow-colored feathers are gone forever.
The wind carried Crow's sad squawks all the way up to heaven. When the Creator heard Crow's deep sadness, he stepped down from the sky to comfort her.
You saved your friends, even though it cost you everything, the Creator said.
For being so brave, I will give you one last gift.
The Creator held up a large snowball full of visions of things yet to come.
Man will arrive soon, the Creator said. He will take the fire and become master. But you, little bird, will be free. Man will never cage you. Man will never hunt you, but your meat tastes like smoke. Man will never cage you, but you have no song. Man will never steal your feather, but they have lost its beauty.
A single black feather fell to the ground. The Creator picked it up and showed it to Crow.
Look closely, the Creator said. When the light hits your feathers, they will shine, and all of the colors you've lost will return. To this day, whenever you find a crow feather, you can always see a rainbow in its reflection.